Okay, so here we are, and we're going to be looking at nation building in Italy and Germany. I think we're up to Germany. Okay, in the aftermath of 1848, tension grew between Austria and Prussia. Each sought to dominate the German Confederation. Remember that Austria is not going to like German nationalism, though, because if there's German nationalism, only a fraction of Austria is ethnically German. The rest of it is split up between so many different nationalities. But anyway, by the end of 1853, Austria was the only German confederation to stay outside the German customs union, the Zollverein, which gave Prussia, with its leading role within the customs union, an advantage in its struggle against Austria. Prussia had emerged from the upheavals of 1848 with a weak parliament, whose wealthy, liberal middle-class representatives wanted to establish once and for all that Parliament, not the king, held the ultimate political power, including control of the army. Prussia's tough-minded Wilhelm I, reigned 1861 to 1888, convinced that great political change and war were quite possible, pushed to raise taxes and increase the defense budget to double the size of the army. Now, the Liberals weren't happy with this, but one of the ways to get them on board was, of course, nationalism. When the Prussian parliament rejected the military budget in 1862 and the Liberals triumphed completely in new elections, King William appointed Otto von Bismarck, Wilhelm, as Prussian prime minister and encouraged him to defy the parliament, which he did. When he took office as Prime Minister in 1862, he made a strong but unfavourable impression by lashing out at the liberal middle class opposition and declaring that Wilhelm's government would rule without parliamentary consent. He denounced liberals for a view that might makes right. Bismarck had the Prussian bureaucracy continue collecting taxes even though the parliament refused to approve the budget, and he reorganised the army. From 1862 to 1866, the voters of Prussia continued to express their opposition by sending large liberal majorities to parliament, which just spurred Bismarck to seek success abroad. In the extremely complicated question of Schleswig-Holstein, two provinces that belonged to Denmark but were members of the German Confederation and on the borders of Prussia, Prussia enlisted Austria in a short but successful war against Denmark. So Prussia gets bigger and it brings two more states in. Convinced that Prussia had to control completely the northern part of the German Confederation, Bismarck cleverly maneuvered Prussia into a position to force Austria out through war and to neutralize Russia and France. In the Austro-Prussian War of 1866, which only lasted 7 weeks, the modernized Prussian army defeated Austria decisively at the Battle of Sadowa. Anticipating Prussia's future needs, Bismarck offered Austria generous peace terms that dissolved the existing German Confederation and negotiated for Austria to withdraw from German affairs. What Bismarck wanted was Kleindeutsch, Little Germany. He did not want to bring Austria in there because it wouldn't make Germany with all the different nationalities among it. He also realized that it would be better not to antagonize Austria any further, and that his victory could well be reversed if Austria reinvested in military or made other alliances. So it was better just to leave it as a sort of peace without victors. Prussia also conquered and annexed several small states and completely dominated the remaining principalities in the newly formed North German Confederation as Bismarck began to realize his goal of Prussian expansion. And there's the map of Prussian expansion. We can look at that, I suppose, later. I think you've got a question on your book. Now, taming the German parliament was going to be a little bit more difficult, but Bismarck was the consummate man of using realpolitik. That's his sort of phrase of making politics work one way or another, either by force, by Machiavellian backhanded deals, by appealing directly to the masses as instead of the talking shops of the parliament. Very cunning, very wily man. Should have been a conservative, was young nobility, but instead sort of seemed to go more towards the liberal side, with middle-class backing and industrial backing. Bismarck realized that the liberal middle class and nationalists were not necessarily hostile to conservative authoritarian government. Thus, during the war with Austria, he increasingly identified Prussia's fate with the national development of Germany. What the liberal mercantile elite want is stability to keep on earning money more than anything. To consolidate Prussian control, Bismarck fashioned a federal constitution for the new North German Confederation, in which each state retained its own local government, but the Prussian king became president of the confederation. The chancellor, Bismarck, was responsible only to the president and the federal government. Wilhelm I and Bismarck controlled the army and foreign affairs. The radical innovation of legislature with members of the lower house elected by universal male suffrage allowed Bismarck to open the door to popular participation and the possibility of going over the head of the middle class directly to the people. So by expanding the franchise, by letting more people vote, he allowed that sort of working class German vote, which always is going to like nationalism, the sort of blue collar nationalist vote that he really captured. Offering an olive branch to the parliamentary opposition, Bismarck asked Parliament to pass a bill to approve after the fact the German government spending between 1862 and 1866. With German unity in sight, most liberals eagerly cooperated. The constitutional struggle in Prussia ended, and the German middle class came to accept the monarchical authority that Bismarck represented. Now, the Franco-Prussian War, thing of genius, really. Bismarck calculated that a patriotic war with France would drive the South German states into his arms. In 1870, the French leaders of the Second Empire, goaded by Bismarck because he doctored a telegram and made it look like that King Wilhelm I had insulted them. He hadn't, but Bismarck had got hold of it and made it look like he had. And alarmed by the powerful new neighbor, declared war to teach Prussia a lesson. As soon as the war began, Bismarck had the wholehearted support of the South German states, which by the end of the war agreed to join the new German Empire. Wilhelm I was proclaimed Emperor of Germany, heading a state that, according to the 1866 Constitution, gave him and his ministers ultimate power and provided for a lower legislative house elected by universal male suffrage. Paris surrendered in January 1871, and France accepted Bismarck's harsh peace terms. France was forced to pay a colossal indemnity of 5 billion francs and to cede the rich eastern province of Alsace and part of Lorraine to Germany. So you can see this 1871 Franco-Prussian War, then you're going to have a 1914-1918 Franco-German dust-up, and of course a 1939 to 1945 similar thing. All the patterns are being set at this point, particularly when we look at World War I and reparations. The French people viewed these territorial losses as a terrible crime, poisoning relationships between France and Germany. The Franco-Prussian War, viewed by many Europeans as a test of nations in a pitiless Darwinian struggle for existence, released an enormous surge of patriotic feeling in the German Empire. Prussia, the weakest of the great powers in 1862, had become the most powerful state in Europe, and in less than a decade, the most Germans were enormously proud of. Okay, next time we're here, we're going to talk about the modernization of Russia and the Ottoman Empire. Okay, thanks a lot.